For 300 years, the people of Earth had kept their mouths shut and their heads down. They smiled when the aliens visited. They nodded when the aliens gave orders. They said yes and thank you. And we understand, while the Galaxy Council treated them like children who could not be trusted with sharp objects. Admiral Grace Holloway remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell. Stories about the day the silver ships first appeared in the sky. Stories about how the whole world had stopped and stared and hoped that maybe, just maybe, humanity was not alone in the universe. That hope had died quickly. The Galaxy Council was not interested in friendship. They were interested in control. Grace stood on the observation deck of the carrier Resolute Dawn, watching Earth spin slowly in the darkness below. The planet looked so peaceful from up here, so blue and green and full of life. 8 billion people lived down there, going about their days, raising their children, dreaming their dreams. None of them knew what was coming. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Kevin Price, stepping up beside her. He was a young man with serious eyes and a voice that always sounded slightly worried. "The Council delegation has entered the solar system. 12 capital ships. They are broadcasting on all frequencies." Grace did not move. She had been expecting this for a long time. "Put it through." The holographic display in front of her flickered to life. A face appeared, if you could call it a face. High Arbiter the Zok of the Veluxi had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across his elongated skull. His skin was the color of old bone, and when he spoke, his thin lips barely moved. "Humans of Earth," the Zok announced. "The Galaxy Council has finished its discussions. Your species has been found unsuitable for advancement to Tier 3 status. You will remain in your current position indefinitely." Grace felt Kevin tense beside her, but she kept her own face calm. This was not unexpected. Humanity had been stuck at Tier 2 for 200 years. Denied access to faster-than-light travel. Denied seats on the Council. Denied everything that mattered. But Desok was not finished. "Furthermore," the High Arbiter continued, "your recent activities in the Kepler exclusion zone are a violation of compact law. You were told not to expand beyond your solar system. You did not listen. Therefore, the Council has decided on punishment." Grace's hands tightened into fists at her sides. "You will surrender all orbital installations to Council forces. You will dismantle your fleet. And you will submit to population reduction protocols. Your current numbers are deemed excessive for a Tier 2 species. A reduction of 70% will bring you into acceptable parameters." The transmission ended. The holographic display went dark. Kevin Price looked like he might be sick. 70%? That means they want to kill almost 6 billion people. "Yes," Grace said quietly. "That is exactly what they want." She had known this day would come. Everyone in the upper levels of Earth's government had known. The Council had done this before to other species who stepped out of line. The Mordathi had refused a similar order 2,000 years ago. Their homeworld was now nothing but floating rocks and dust. But humanity was not the Mordathi. Humanity had learned from their example. "Get me Captain Daniel Marsh on the silent vigil," Grace ordered. "And wake up the President. Tell her it is time." Kevin hurried away to follow her commands. Grace remained at the window, looking down at the blue marble of Earth. Somewhere down there, her daughter was putting her grandchildren to bed. Somewhere down there, people were eating dinner and watching television and living their lives, without any idea that an alien fleet was demanding their extinction. She thought about all the years of silence, all the years of pretending to be weak, all the years of smiling and nodding while the Council looked down on humanity like they were insects beneath their feet. It had been hard. So incredibly hard. There had been times when she wanted to scream, wanted to fight, wanted to show these arrogant aliens what humans were really capable of. but her grandmother had taught her patience. And her mother had taught her planning. And now, after 300 years of waiting, humanity was finally ready deep in the belly of the Resolute Dawn, past security checkpoints that did not officially exist. Through corridors that appeared on no map, there was a room. In that room, there were screens showing things that the Galaxy Council had never seen. Ships that had been built in secret. Weapons that had been developed in hidden laboratories. An entire fleet that had been constructed piece by piece over 3 centuries. Hidden in the shadows of asteroids and the dark sides of moons. The Council thought they knew everything about Earth. They had satellites watching the planet. They had spies in human governments. They had sensors that could detect a ship being built anywhere in the solar system, or so they believed. Humans were very good at hiding things. They had been hiding things from each other for thousands of years before the aliens ever arrived. Hiding things from the Council was just a matter of applying those same skills on a larger scale. Grace took a deep breath and turned away from the window. There was work to do. The Council had given them an impossible choice: die slowly through population reduction, or die quickly by refusing. But there was a third option that Desok and his masters had never considered: fight back. And win. She walked to the command center, where her officers were already gathering. Their faces were pale but determined. They had all trained for this moment. They had all sworn oaths to protect Earth and her people. Now it was time to keep those promises. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grace said, her voice steady and strong, "the Council has shown us who they really are. They are not peacekeepers. They are not guardians of galactic civilization. They are bullies and tyrants who crush anyone who threatens their power." She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "For 300 years, we have been quiet. We have been patient. We have let them think we were broken and beaten and afraid. But we were never any of those things. We were waiting. And now the wait is over." She turned to the main display and entered a code that only 12 people in the entire solar system knew. "Activate Project Prometheus," she said. "It is time for Earth to speak." And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, 700 ships that did not exist began to wake up. President Catherine Webb had not slept in 2 days. Her eyes burned and her head ached, and her coffee had gone cold hours ago. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the decision she was about to make. A decision that would determine whether humanity lived or died. She sat at the head of a long table in a room, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. This room did not appear on any government records. The people sitting around the table did not officially exist. And the things they were discussing would have seemed like science fiction to anyone who was not in this room. "Let me make sure. I understand," said General Marcus Cole. He was a big man, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. "The Council wants us to kill 6 billion of our own people. And if we refuse, they will kill all of us." "That is correct," said Dr. Lisa Grant. She was a small woman with glasses and nervous hands, but her voice was steady. She had spent her entire career studying the Galaxy Council, learning their history, understanding their methods. This is standard procedure for them. They have done it to 17 other species over the past 50,000 years. Any civilization that grows too large or too independent gets reduced to a manageable size. "Manageable," Catherine repeated. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. "They want to manage us like livestock. Essentially, yes." Catherine stood up and walked to the window. There was no view, of course. They were a mile underground. But she liked to move when she was thinking, and right now she had a lot to think about. The Galaxy Council had controlled this part of the universe for longer than humans had existed as a species. They had technology that made Earth's most advanced weapons look like toys. They had millions of ships spread across thousands of star systems. and they had never, not once in their entire history, lost a war. Fighting them seemed impossible. Surrendering meant death. There was no good choice here, but then again, humans had always been good at finding options that nobody else could see. "Tell me about Project Prometheus," Catherine said without turning around. The room went very quiet. General Cole and Dr. Grant exchanged looks. This was the most closely guarded secret in human history. Only a handful of people knew the full truth. Admiral Holloway's face appeared on the screen at the far end of the room. Only a handful of people knew the full truth. Admiral Holloway's face appeared on the screen at the far end of the room. She had been listening from orbit, waiting for this moment. "Madam President," Grace said, "Project Prometheus began the same year the Council made first contact. Our ancestors looked at these aliens and their advanced technology and their massive fleets, and they made a decision. They decided that someday humanity would need to defend itself. So they started building. The main display changed. Instead of star maps and Council fleet movements, it now showed something else entirely. Blueprints, schematics, construction records dating back 3 centuries. We built shipyards on the dark side of the moon, where Council satellites could not see them," Grace continued. "We built research facilities in the atmosphere of Venus, hidden by the clouds. We built weapons factories inside asteroids in the belt. Everything was underground. Everything was hidden. Everything was secret." Catherine stared at the screen. She'd been briefed on Project Prometheus when she first became president, but seeing the full scope of it still took her breath away. "How many ships?" she asked. 742 combat vessels," Grace replied, "including 12 Dreadnought-class ships that are larger and more powerful than anything the Council has ever built. We did not just copy their technology, Madam President. We studied it. We understood it. And then we made it better." General Cole leaned forward. "Even with 700 ships, we are massively outnumbered. The Council has millions of vessels at their command." "Numbers are not everything," said a new voice. Captain Daniel Marsh appeared on a secondary screen. He was an older man with a scarred face and calm eyes that had seen too much. "We have spent 300 years watching them, learning how they think, finding their weaknesses. They have never fought an enemy who prepared this long or this carefully." Dr. Grant nodded slowly. "He is right. The Council wins because they overwhelm their opponents with superior numbers and technology. But their tactics have not changed in 10,000 years. They are predictable, overconfident. They do not adapt because they have never needed to." Catherine turned back to face the room. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady. "You are asking me to start a war with the most powerful force in the galaxy. A war we might not win." "With respect, Madam President," Grace said, "they started this war 300 years ago when they first looked down on us. We are simply choosing to fight back. And if we lose, then we die free instead of dying on our knees." Catherine closed her eyes. She thought about her husband, who had died 10 years ago. She thought about her children, who were grown now with families of their own. She thought about her grandchildren, who were too young to understand what was happening, but who deserved a chance to grow up in a universe where they were not treated like animals. The Council had given humanity 2 options: submit or die. But Catherine Webb had not become president by accepting the options other people gave her. "General Cole," she said, opening her eyes, "begin mobilizing our forces. Admiral Holloway, activate the Prometheus fleet. Captain Marsh, I want a battle plan on my desk in 6 hours." She looked around the room at the faces of the people who would help her fight the impossible fight. And someone sent a message to High Arbiter Desok. "Tell him that Earth respectfully declines his generous offer. Tell him that if he wants our submission, he will have to come and take it. A small smile crossed her face. Tell him that the quiet ones are done being quiet. High Arbiter Thesok stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet burn. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were primitives. They had been discovered barely 300 years ago, still playing with chemical rockets and nuclear bombs like children with dangerous toys. They had no real military. They had no advanced weapons. They were supposed to be easy, but the ships that were tearing through his formation, like wolves through sheep, did not look primitive at all. Where did they come from? Screamed Admiral Vethkor of the Kathrani Strike Force. His insect-like mandibles clicked together in panic as another one of his cruisers exploded on the view screen. Our intelligence said they had 30 patrol ships. 30? There are hundreds of them. Thesok did not answer. He was watching the battle unfold with all 6 of his eyes, and what he saw filled him with something he had not felt in a very long time. Fear. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. Council fleets fought in neat formations, lines of ships advancing together, firing in coordinated volleys. It was elegant. It was traditional. It had worked for 10,000 years. The humans did not fight like that at all. Their ships moved in loose groups that constantly shifted and changed. They darted in and out of the council formation, striking at weak points, covering each other, adapting to every move the council made. It was chaos. It was unpredictable. And it was working. On the bridge of the dreadnought Iron Promise, Captain Amy Sullivan watched the enemy fleet fall apart with grim satisfaction. They do not know what to do, said Commander Jake Torres from the weapons station. He was grinning despite the tension. Look at them. They are trying to reform their battle lines, but every time they do, we hit them from a different angle. That is because they fight the same way every time, Amy replied. They have never had to adapt. They have never faced an enemy who did not play by their rules. She studied the tactical display. The Council fleet had entered the solar system with 12 capital ships and over 200 support vessels. They had expected to find a handful of outdated human patrol boats and some orbital defense platforms. Instead, they had found the Prometheus fleet waiting for them in the shadow of Saturn's rings. The first few minutes of the battle had been devastating for the Council. The human ships had weapons they had never seen before. Kinetic accelerators that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missiles that adjusted their course in mid-flight. Electronic warfare systems that blinded Council sensors and scrambled their communications. The Council had better shields. The Council had more ships. But the humans had surprise, planning, and 300 years of pent-up rage. Target the lead cruiser, Amy ordered. Full kinetic spread. The Iron Promise shuddered as its main guns fired. Across the void of space, a Kathrani cruiser tried to raise its shields in time. It failed. The kinetic rounds punched through the alien ship like needles through paper, and a moment later it broke apart in a silent explosion. Thesok watched another ship die and felt his heart sink in his chest. He had been so confident when this mission began. The Council had given him enough firepower to crush any resistance. They had told him it would be simple. Arrive, make demands, destroy anyone who refused. Standard procedure, but nothing about this was standard. High Arbiter, said his communications officer, we are receiving a transmission. It is the human admiral. Thesok hesitated. Speaking to the enemy during battle was not done. It showed weakness. But he needed time to regroup, and perhaps the humans would give him that time while they talked. Put it through, he said. Admiral Grace Holloway's face appeared on the screen. She was an older human female with gray hair and cold eyes. She did not look afraid. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. High Arbiter Thesok, she said, your fleet is losing. Half your ships are damaged or destroyed. Your battle lines are broken. Your commanders are in panic. Desok raised his chin. This changes nothing, human. Even if you win this battle, the full might of the Council will descend upon your pathetic world. You cannot defeat us. Perhaps, Grace replied. But today, we are defeating you. And tomorrow, we will defeat whoever they send next. And we will keep defeating them until your Council understands something very important. And what is that? Grace leaned closer to the camera. We are not your servants. We are not your pets. We are not your livestock to be culled when our numbers grow too large. We are human beings, and we will never, ever kneel. She cut the transmission. Desok stared at the blank screen for a moment. Then he turned to his navigation officer. Fall back to Titan. We need to regroup, and he stopped. On the view screen, more ships were appearing from behind Saturn's largest moon. Human ships. Hundreds of them. They had been waiting there, hidden, ready to cut off any retreat. The trap was complete. Admiral Holloway's voice came through again, this time on an open channel that all the Council ships could hear. High Arbiter, you have two choices. Surrender your fleet and leave our solar system immediately, or watch us destroy every ship you have. You have 1 minute to decide. Desok looked at his tactical display. His remaining ships were surrounded. His weapons were depleted. His crews were terrified. He had lost more vessels in the last hour than the Council had lost in the last 1,000 years. For the first time in his long life, he gave an order to retreat. All ships, he said, his voice hollow with defeat, withdraw from the system. Set course for Council space. As his flagship turned and ran, Desok made a silent promise. This was not over. The Council would return with a fleet so large that not even the humans could stop it. They would burn Earth to ash and scatter humanity to the void. He would make sure of it. But watching the human ships let him go. He could not shake the feeling that somehow, impossibly, the primitives had planned for that too. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass, on 1,000 different worlds, in 100 different languages. Beings of every shape and size heard the same impossible story. The humans had won. A species that had been under Council control for only 300 years. A species that had been treated like clever animals had somehow defeated a Council battle fleet. Not just defeated, humiliated. High Arbiter Desok returned to Ascending Prime with less than half his ships. The rest were floating wreckage in the outer reaches of the human solar system. He stood before the Grand Council and told them what had happened, and for the first time in living memory, the Great Chamber fell completely silent. Grand Arbiter Zeloth was very old. She had ruled the Council for 6,000 years, and in all that time, she had never heard anything like this. Her body was failing now, kept alive by machines and medicines that would have seemed like magic to younger species. But her mind was still sharp, and her anger was still hot. "Explain this to me," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. Explain how a fleet of 12 capital ships was destroyed by primitives who was still living in caves when I was young. Desok lowered his 6 eyes. They had weapons we did not expect. Ships we did not know about. They have been preparing for this day since we first made contact with them. Preparing? Zealot's voice rose. You are telling me they have been building a secret military for 3 centuries, and our intelligence services knew nothing about it. It appears so, Grand Arbiter. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives from all 12 elder species shouted at each other, blaming each other, demanding explanations. The Kathrani accused the Veluxi of incompetence. The Veluxi blamed the Ormundi for not providing better surveillance technology. The smaller species tried to stay out of the way while the giants fought. Only one figure remained calm. Observer Kethra of the Silenti stood in the shadows at the edge of the chamber. watching everything with eyes that no longer existed in any physical form. The Silenti were the oldest species in the known universe. They had transcended physical bodies millions of years ago and now existed as patterns of light and energy. They rarely spoke in council meetings. When they did, everyone listened. "You are wasting time," Kethra said, and the chamber fell silent. "The humans have done what 17 other species tried and failed to do. They have shown the galaxy that the council can be beaten. Then we will crush them utterly," Zeloth declared. "We will assemble the Grand Fleet, every ship in council space. We will descend upon their world and burn it to ashes." "And then what?" Kethra asked. "The message has already been sent. Other species are watching. Other species are listening. The Mordathi remnants in the Outer Rim. The Thesan colonies you thought you had broken. The dozens of smaller species who obey you only because they believe they have no choice." Zeloth's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting they would dare to rebel?" "I am suggesting that hope is a dangerous thing. For 10,000 years, the Council has maintained control because the conquered believed resistance was impossible. The humans have proven that it is not." Meanwhile, on Earth, President Catherine Webb stood before the United Nations General Assembly. Every nation on the planet was represented. Every leader, every diplomat, every person of importance had gathered to hear what she had to say. "Citizens of Earth," she began, "3 weeks ago, we won a battle, but we have not won the war. The Council will return. They will bring more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. They cannot allow our victory to stand, because if we survive, their entire empire begins to crumble." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I will not lie to you. The fight ahead will be hard. We will lose people we love. We will face moments when everything seems hopeless. The Council has ruled this galaxy for longer than human civilization has existed. Defeating them will be the greatest challenge our species has ever faced." Catherine straightened her shoulders. "But we are not alone. In the weeks since our victory, we have received messages from across the galaxy. Secret messages sent through hidden channels from species who have been waiting for someone to stand up. The Mordathi, who were nearly destroyed 2,000 years ago. The Thesan, who have lived under council occupation for 5 centuries. And others. So many others. All of them watching. All of them hoping. All of them asking the same question." She stepped forward, her voice rising. "Can it be done? Can the Council be defeated?" "Today, I answered that question. Yes, it can be done. Not by Earth alone, but by all of us together. Every species that has been stepped on, every world that has been exploited, every civilization that has been told they are not good enough to stand among the stars." She pointed upward, toward the sky beyond the ceiling. "The Council thinks they are fighting one small planet. They are wrong. They are fighting an idea. The idea that every being, no matter how small or young or different, deserves to be free. That is what we are fighting for. That is what we will win." In the days that followed, more messages arrived. Ships began to gather in the darkness between stars. Old enemies became allies. Ancient hatreds were set aside. For the first time in galactic history, the conquered were uniting against those who had conquered them. And at the center of it all, small and blue and stubborn, Earth kept sending out its message. "You are not alone. We will fight together. And together, we will win." Grand Arbiter Zeloth assembled her grand fleet and set course for the human solar system. She brought 200,000 ships. She brought weapons that could crack planets in half. She brought the full weight of 10,000 years of council dominance. She thought she was going to crush a rebellion. She had no idea she was walking into a revolution. The Grand Fleet arrived at the edge of the human solar system like a wave of darkness rolling across the void. 200,000 ships stretched from one end of the sensor screens to the other. Capital ships the size of small moons. Carriers filled with thousands of fighters. Weapons platforms bristling with enough firepower to burn worlds to cinders. Grand Arbiter Zeloth stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the largest and most powerful ship ever built by the Council. She was old, so old that she could barely remember a time before her rule began. But she remembered one thing clearly. No one had ever defied the Council and survived. No one. Begin the approach, she ordered. Destroy everything in our path. Leave nothing alive. The Grand Fleet moved forward. On 1,000 ships, crews prepared for what they expected to be a quick and brutal victory. The humans had won one battle through luck and surprise. They would not be so lucky again. But as the fleet passed the orbit of Neptune, something strange happened. Grand Arbiter, said her sensor officer, his voice suddenly uncertain, we are detecting additional contacts. Many additional contacts. Zeloth turned to look at the tactical display. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. The human fleet was there, positioned in a defensive formation near Saturn. But behind them, emerging from the shadows of moons and the rings of planets, were other ships. Ships that did not match human designs, Mortithy cruisers. Sleek and deadly, painted with symbols that had not been seen in 2,000 years. Thesan warships. Battered and scarred, but flying the flags of a freedom that had been forbidden to them for 5 centuries. And others. Dozens of others. Ships from species that had supposedly been conquered, supposedly been broken, supposedly been loyal servants of the Council for generations. What is this? Zeloth whispered. Admiral Grace Holloway's voice came through on every frequency, reaching every ship in both fleets. Grand Arbiter Zeloth, she said, you are probably very confused right now. Let me help you understand what is happening. On the screen, Grace's face appeared. She looked tired but calm. Calm like a person who has planned for something for a very long time and is finally seeing that plan come together. For 300 years, we did not just build ships. We built something more important. We built hope. We reached out to every species you had crushed, every world you had enslaved, every civilization you had ground beneath your feet. We found them in the darkness. We talked to them in secret, and we gave them something they had lost. Behind the human fleet, more ships kept appearing. What had been thousands was becoming tens of thousands. A coalition that had been forming in silence for 3 centuries, waiting for this moment. We gave them a reason to believe that things could be different, Grace continued. That the Council was not unbeatable. That someday, if they were patient, if they were brave, they could be free. Zeloth stared at the screen with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. She had ruled the galaxy for 6,000 years. She had crushed rebellions, destroyed worlds, exterminated species that dared to oppose her. And now, in the twilight of her impossibly long life, she was watching everything she had built begin to crumble. You are bluffing, she said, but her voice wavered. These ships are no match for the Grand Fleet. We will destroy them all. Maybe, Grace replied. You probably have more firepower than we do. Your ships are probably more advanced. If you fight us, you will probably kill a lot of us. She leaned forward. But you will not kill all of us. And while you are fighting here, while your fleets are dying in our solar system, the rest of the galaxy will be watching. Every species you have oppressed. Every world you have controlled. They will see that the Council can be hurt. They will see that the Masters can bleed. And they will rise up. Grace's voice hardened. You crossed the final line when you threatened to murder 6 billion innocent people. You thought we would submit. You thought we would kneel. But we are human beings, Grand Arbiter. We do not kneel. And neither do our friends. On the tactical display, the Coalition fleet finished forming up. Earth ships flew alongside Mordathi cruisers. Thesan warships took position next to vessels from a dozen other species. Former enemies stood together against a common threat. President Catherine Webb's voice joined the broadcast. Grand Arbiter Zeloth, you have a choice. You can withdraw your fleet, dissolve the Council, and let every species in the galaxy chart their own course. You can end this peacefully today, without any more death. She paused. Or you can fight. And if you fight, you will discover what happens when the quiet ones finally decide to speak. What happens when the slaves break their chains? What happens when hope becomes stronger than fear? For a long moment, silence hung across the void of space. Two fleets faced each other, waiting. The fate of the galaxy balanced on a knife's edge. Grand Arbiter Zeloth looked at her tactical officers. She looked at the ships surrounding her. She looked at the Coalition fleet, that impossible gathering of species who should have been too afraid. Too broken, too hopeless to ever stand against her. And then, for the first time in 6,000 years, she gave an order she had never given before. All ships, withdraw. Return to Council space. Her officers stared at her in shock. But slowly, reluctantly, the Grand Fleet began to turn. 200,000 ships, the largest armada ever assembled, retreated from a battle they might have won because their leader had finally understood something important. You cannot rule through fear alone. Sooner or later, the fear runs out. Admiral Grace Holloway watched the enemy fleet disappear into the darkness. Beside her on the observation deck, Captain Amy Sullivan shook her head in wonder. I never thought I would see this day, Amy said quietly. I never thought it was possible. Grace smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. That is the thing about humans, Captain. We never stop believing in impossible things. Below them, Earth turned slowly in the light of its ancient sun. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, beings of every shape and size looked up at the stars and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. Freedom. The Council did not fall that day. It took years of negotiation, years of change, years of learning to live in a galaxy where power was shared instead of hoarded. There were setbacks and struggles and moments when everything seemed like it might fall apart, but it never did, because somewhere in the darkness, there was always a small blue planet. A planet full of stubborn, impossible, hopeful people who had proven that even the mightiest empire could be challenged. Earth had stayed quiet for 300 years, but when it finally spoke, the whole galaxy listened.